till death or homosexuality do us part. It was 1993, and in a few days we were going to Tulsa for my 10-year high school reunion. Sam and I had been married 2 years. We were living in sunny Los Angeles. He was in medical school. I had a job writing a television show. It was a terrible show at the time, but it was still exciting. We'd been looking at houses for 6 months, and we'd finally found one in Pasadena we both loved. Everything was going great until Sam told me he thought he might be gay. He wasn't sure he was gay, having never been with a man, but he thought it was something he ought to figure out. Apparently, the forever of a wedding vow sounded sort of vague and idealistic, whereas 30-year mortgage was surprisingly specific. You know, it sounded like a commitment, the kind of commitment you shouldn't make when your sexuality is pending. I sat stunned in the living room of our Spanish Art Deco duplex apartment and stared at our new dining room table, which we'd bought at the Rose Bowl flea market because Sam liked antique shopping. Yes, I suppose there were signs. Like that my first impression of Sam was that he was gay. He was too easy to talk to, too animated, too good, frankly, to be straight. Plus, there was the matter of his too orange leather jacket with the tiger print lining. There was something about the lining. But then he asked me to marry him, and we slept together, and I put on the big white dress in front of 200 of my closest friends, so I figured I was straight. I'm sorry, I totally screwed up that line. Cut, back up. Because really, we slept together before we got married. So really what's supposed to be is then he asked me out, and we slept together, and he asked me to marry him, and I put on the big white dress in front of 200 of my closest friends, so I figured he was straight. So it's better that way. Of course, I now know that if it's bad luck for the groom to see you in your dress before the wedding, it's very bad luck if he wants to help you shop for it. It's so embarrassing because it's all true. I did, weeks before my wedding, confess one thing to one friend, Julie. And this, in and of itself, should have been a red flag, because I usually tell my friends everything, so anything I'm not talking about is usually the one thing I should be talking about. So I told Julie that after Sam and I were engaged, Sam admitted he sometimes noticed men. Without hesitation, Julie told me her theory about the spectrum of sexuality and how we all lie somewhere along it, and most of us appreciate looking at people of the same sex, but we would never do anything about it. P.S. 4 years later, Julie realized she was a lesbian. As I was recalling all of these signs, I realized Sam was still talking. He said he'd been wanting to discuss this for a while. It was ripping him apart. He didn't want to hurt me. Maybe he discovered he was only like 30% gay and then he could be with me. And all I could think was, how would we calculate that? He'd sleep with 10 men and enjoy 3 of them? I wasn't good at math. Sam sighed and said he was so relieved to get that off his chest, he kind of wanted to have sex. With who, I asked. With you. I wasn't in the mood. I just wanted to go to sleep and wake up when the bookstores were open. This was a different time, a time before Amazon, when you could go to actual bookstores like B. Dalton, which no longer exists, at the farmer's market, which is now the Grove, and visit their little self-help section where all problems could be solved. Except the problem of there being no book for wives of men who thought they might be gay. There was a book called Loving Someone Gay for teachers and family members, but nothing for spouses. That's when I officially started to panic. This was Los Angeles. I did not want to pioneer a problem. A clerk, Patrick from Calabasas, asked if I needed help with anything, and I wanted to say, God, yes, and then I would give him this long list that included find me a therapist and break the news to my parents. But Sam had asked me not to talk to anyone about any of this yet. He wasn't ready to come out, and I assumed that gag order extended to strangers with name tags. So I muttered, this is the self-help section, Patrick, so clearly I would like to help myself. I spent most of my workday looking for a therapist, something I'd managed to avoid for a blissful and unexamined 30 years. The Writers Guild had some therapists who only required a $10 copayment. Now, it occurred to me that therapy is not an arena in which to skimp. But it also occurred to me that I might be going once a week for the rest of my life, so that could add up. Well, apparently, you get what you copay for. Yes, My therapist was a large Midwestern woman wearing red pants and a pink and white striped shirt. And I remember thinking, she can't put together an outfit, and I need her to put together my whole life. And she had all these questions that never occurred to me. Like, she didn't buy Sam's "I've never been with a man" story. She thought that he should be AIDS tested and that I should take an AIDS test and that he must have known when he proposed. And she had a lot of anger that we worked on. Eventually, she felt better, I think, but I didn't. So I decided, while she was talking, that Sam and I would proceed to my reunion as planned. That was my big decision. That's how bad a therapist she was. Not only would we be spending 3 days in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my hometown, we would be spending 3 days in my home with my parents, trying to act like everything was fine. I know this sounds like a terrible idea, and it was, but in my fragile state, it seemed preferable to not going, or going alone to my reunion and possibly melting into a weepy heap when asked what I'd been up to lately. Sam was game. We both knew he was ruining my life. He didn't want to ruin my reunion on top of it. Plus, he had experience acting. Not just acting like a straight man, but in college, he was in a group at Penn called Mask and Wig, which was kind of like Monty Python. Yes, they sang and danced. Yes, sometimes in dresses. Oh, the pink flags I had ignored. Now, a high school reunion is traumatic for women, no matter where you are in life. Single women feel self-conscious about not being married. Married women feel self-conscious about not being mothers. Mothers feel self-conscious about not working. Working mothers feel self-conscious about not staying home. And everyone feels bad. Yet even in this sea of self-consciousness, I was the most self-conscious of all. Even when I won most successful, which is not such a coup in Oklahoma. The runner-up was manager of the Foot Locker or something. I was thinking, yeah, you know what's not so successful right now? My marriage. To make matters worse, something I kept thinking simply wasn't possible. Staying with my parents meant I would have to avoid my mother, because she is an eagle eye for emotion. She's the type of mother who will leave you a message on your answering machine saying, "You don't sound so happy," on your outgoing message. Which couldn't have been why she was calling, but even though you were just tired when you recorded your message, you could usually think of something you might be upset about when she pressed. But I did manage to avoid my mother by never being alone in a room with her that whole weekend. And that's how I got ambushed by my father. It wasn't exactly an ambush. He looked up from ESPN to ask if everything was okay, and I heard myself scream, "No, if everything was okay, Sam would be in here watching SportsCenter with you instead of in the kitchen with Mom, flipping through House Beautiful." Just slipped out. I never intended to tell my father. That's not the system in our house. You tell my mother, and my mother tells my father. But there I was, telling my father that my husband wanted to sleep with men. His response was, "I'd like to sleep with Debbie Reynolds, but your mom's not going to let me." And I said, "What if you wanted to sleep with Burt Reynolds?" He didn't get it. You couldn't blame him. He didn't have much experience with the gay population. There was one man in his college fraternity, Jerry Hobbleman, who everyone knew had left his wife and kids to pursue a gay lifestyle, but no one had talked to him since. To Dad's credit, he didn't tell my mother until we'd left town. So somehow, Sam and I survived the weekend. But Mr. Kaufman, our landlord who lived downstairs, did not. He died in his sleep due to a heart attack. What I remember about Mr. Kaufman's funeral was that it was a relief. Not because I wanted him dead, but because a funeral is a place where it's perfectly acceptable to cry. And I had been looking for a place like that ever since Sam broke his news. It probably looked odd as the tenant to be crying harder than the widow. But death is death, and people don't really question your response in the face of it. The other comforting aspect of a funeral is that there's a body, a coffin, a grave, a ritual that enables people to mourn. There's a physical ending, not just an emotional one. There's a time of death, of burial. The end of a relationship is never so clearly marked. Sam held my hand as the coffin was lowered into the ground. Then, it being a Jewish funeral, they needed 10 men for a minyan, and Sam was asked to join them. I didn't want him to leave. He would be leaving with the men soon enough. But I finally said go, and I realized I meant it in the largest sense possible. The morning the movers were coming for Sam's things, I looked out of our window and saw Mrs. Kaufman gardening. She had always enjoyed gardening, but since her husband died, she seemed to be more devoted than ever to the living things, to seeing that nothing else slipped away. So I knew she'd be disappointed to hear that Sam was slipping away and that I was letting him. You have to tell her you're leaving, I said to Sam. She's right on front. The truck will be here any minute. Sam continued packing. He hadn't told his mother he was moving out. Why should he tell Mrs. Kaufman? He wasn't ready to deal with things yet. So I had to deal with Mrs. Kaufman just as it seemed I had to deal with everything. I'd gone with Sam to look for an apartment. I'd ventured into a gay bookstore to buy him a book on coming out. I did find a book there for me, incidentally. It was called The Other Side of the Closet. But I was feeling more like the closet organizer. I mean, I was starting to feel angry at Sam, which was good because up until that point, only my therapist had been. Even my dad was starting to sympathize. He said the next time he called, homosexuality is like 99% genetic. I figured he'd been on the internet doing research or something. It turned out my dad had tracked down Jerry Hobbleman and taken him to lunch at Denny's. And you have to understand, my dad is not a take a man to lunch kind of guy. I'm certain there were many disclaimers. My father afraid it might seem like a date or something, Afraid the married man he was referring to might be thought to be himself. Of course, it would be clear that wasn't the case as soon as he showed up in shorts, black socks, and dress shoes. But still, he somehow managed to ask all the questions he needed answered, like, could you have stayed with your wife? Did you ever regret leaving? Are you happier now? Did she get over it? It was possibly the nicest thing a father ever did for a daughter, taking Jerry Hobbleman to lunch. And now, almost 20 years later, Sam is happier, and so am I. It was rough when he had a husband and kids before I did. But that additional decade of being single became the basis of my writing career, which led me to a job on Sex and the City, which led me to New York, which led me to E! And the straight guy I'm now happily married to. And we just adopted a baby girl using the same attorney Sam used for his 2 boys. So despite how I felt at my reunion, Sam did not ruin my life by coming out. He actually allowed us both to become the most successful versions of ourselves.
My lunch mirrored my life, broken and soggy, and nobody wanted to trade with me. My parents were going through a separation involving my father's affair with a Scientologist. And surprisingly, I discovered the hard way that asking kids if they believed L. Ron Hubbard was the Messiah did not make you cool. It made you go see the guidance counselor. So come 8th grade, I had very few friends and very many worries. And I was looking for someone to take them all away. And there was Stephanie Skolnick. She had a big ass and huge boobs and just seemed so grown up. I, however, was a late bloomer. In math class, Daniel Stieglitz called me a tetrahedron. And when I asked